Okay, so welcome to the video. You just see me getting set up here to cast some epoxy resin. I tried this with a couple of different colors, and this actually didn't work out very well the first time around. So I actually off camera wound up recasting a new block that had better color saturation. I was asked to produce a pen in a specific color, this Acapulco Blue from the 1967 Ford Mustang. And I don't think I did it perfectly by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it was okay. You guys can be the judge of that. You can actually find the color on online. It's available there. So I used some black diamond pigment powder to add to the tint, a generic sort of wish blue, and an acrylic paint, which I recommend being very careful with when you are casting it in resin. Acrylic paint can really thin out the resin and keep it from hardening properly, so you really got to limit how much you do there. I don't have a pressure pot, so in order to get the bubbles out, I'm using a torch. Sorry, the camera angle is bad. This is my limited workspace issue here. I didn't notice it until afterwards. But I'm just using a blowtorch just to take the bubbles out as I mix my colors in the mold. So I wanted to prep the tubes, so I rough them up with 220 grit, which is something that is important to do. Those brass tubes don't adhere very well to the cast block unless they are roughed up a little bit. Now in this case, preparing the tubes meant actually painting them. So you're going to see in just a moment when I'm done roughing those up with the 220 that I'm going to, there we go, there's the paint. This is acrylic paint. Same one that I used in the block. But it prevents the brass from showing through when I've turned it down. So that's the new block. I forgot to hit record on the camera when I was cutting them and drilling them. But I drilled them out on the lathe. I have a drill press, but I don't have a proper clamp for it. So I stick them in the chuck and use a drill bit adapter to drill them out. And it works reasonably well, as long as I get them in the chuck nice and straight. And you can just see me using the pen mill shaft and the cutter head, and I'm just cleaning out any of the 5-minute epoxy that I used to glue in the tubes. I'm just cleaning that out and trimming the ends down until you can just see some of the inner tube. The shiny bit shows up. And fitting the bushings. Over to the lathe. So this is an older second-hand lathe, so I have to use a wrench to tighten some things. And I try to produce my pens almost exclusively with a skew chisel, though I also will use a round nose scraper in this video. But I learned how to make pens with a skew, and I don't use gouges at all when I'm making pens. And my camera just fell there a little bit. So one of the things about using a skew chisel like this is that you really want to make sure that you get your angle correct. Skews are not meant to be sort of presented to the work straight on. They're meant to be presented on a slant, like you can see me doing there. If you get a nice ride on the bevel of the blade, and it does bevel on both sides, so you can do it in both directions. But if you get a nice ride on it, it will cut nice and clean, and the steel will probably give you one of the cleanest cuts you'll get out of any tool, traditional or carbide, that you come across. But it does require a little bit of practice, as you can see me slipping a few times there, and that's just because I wasn't getting the bevel lined up properly and I was getting ahead of myself. Now, skews are quite versatile. You can also use them as a square-off scraper, and they do come in curved varieties as well. So, you know, that is a possibility as well. Here you see me using it as a scraper right there, and it takes, you know, a very small amount of material off. Scraping with a skew, though, does tend to dull the blade very quickly, but it can be very effective, particularly at getting those ends down to size. So when you're making a pen like this, I always find personally that I like to get my two outside ends near the bushings set, and then I can worry about my shape in the middle. Do I want to have a wider piece or a tapered piece? And then you can see I just switched to a round nose scraper just to clean things off. And now we're working on the other side. So much the same process. You'll pardon the watery effect of the video. My tripod was basically just sitting on my lathe, and so as the lathe vibrates, the camera vibrates, and I just can't get that wobble out of the video. Hopefully next video I'll have a better camera setup. Now, if you've never worked with resin before, you'll probably note the sheer number of shavings here. There are a lot, and they do get in the way quite quickly. I don't know if I mentioned before, I just got this resin online on Amazon. It's this Vivid Scientific optically clear, and it's been good to me. It's pretty forgiving. So yeah, so I'm on to sanding, and I won't make you watch the whole thing. That's me sanding at 80 grit, and I did start pretty rough. You can see there's, you know, some unevenness to it I still need to smooth out, and that's why I'm using the 80 grit, because it does smooth that out quite nicely. So I want to ultimately produce a nice smooth finish. And I'm up to 600 grit there. So I showed you the 80, I showed you the 600, cleaning it with denatured alcohol, or in this case I don't have denatured technically, this is rubbing alcohol, but it's an ethyl rubbing alcohol. You can find them in Canada, but they are a little tough to find. Alright, so I ran into a little trouble with the camera here. I did 5 coats of Starbond Heavy Thin, and you see me, I just showed you coat 1 and coat 5, and then I did 5 coats of this Instacure Medium. And I really just, I've got a glove underneath that piece of paper so I don't get the glue stuck on my hand, and off I go to the races. Now, that was me showing you, I think, number 4 or 5. I ran into a little trouble here. Sorry, I ran into a little trouble because my camera died. So that kind of left me with nothing else to show you. When I finished letting the glue cure, and those are CA glues or super glues, when I finished letting those cure, I continued sanding. I sanded again with 600 grit just to give it, a quick, make sure it's all smoothed out. And then I went straight into micro mesh, and that went from, I think it was 1200 grit up to 12,000 grit, something like that. I'd have to look at my micro meshes again. But anyway, the end result was a beautiful fountain pen, calligraphy pen, and I didn't unfortunately get to show you me putting it all together. I was on a deadline. I had intended to charge up the phone and record, because I obviously discovered that it had died after I finished sanding it up, but I was unable to do that because I was pressed for time. This was a commission and I needed to have it done for the next day, and I just simply didn't have access to the charger at the time. So unfortunately you didn't get to see the final assembly process, but I will put a couple of stills up here at the end. Okay, thank you very much, and if you liked the video, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, share it, drop a subscribe. See you on the next one.